In this video, I'm going to talk about progressive accident settlements, and I'm actually going to give settlement amounts. You're going to hear about cases of mine, personal injury cases, where I've settled with Progressive, where they've paid me $100,000 and $50,000 in a couple of other cases, and many other settlements. I'm also going to talk about how Uber is now using Progressive as one of their auto insurers, and how that's going to affect claims of Uber passengers and others. Jay-Z helps of Florida Injury Law Firm. I'm injury attorney Justin Ziegler. The bad news with Progressive is they typically write small bodily injury liability policies. That means there often will be limited auto insurance when Progressive happens to be the insurer in an accident. That's not where the bad news stops. Progressive is very, very cheap or tight when it comes to paying out personal injury claims, particularly in soft tissue claims where the sole claim is someone's neck or back being hurt and there's not really objective findings of a serious injury. What this means is for the pain and suffering component of the claim, Progressive pays on the lower end of the scale, all things equal, as opposed to some other auto insurers like Chubb or Hartford, who happen to have a reputation for paying better. So any day of the week, I'd prefer having an insurer like Zurich or USAA or Chubb or Hartford in a case than Progressive. As of March 1st, 2018, Progressive landed Uber's account for all auto accidents in Florida from March 1st, 2018 forward. Prior, Uber had James River, who had a better reputation than Progressive. All in all, the fact that Progressive is now Uber's insurer in Florida is bad news for Uber riders. What's the good news with Progressive? The good news is that overall, the adjusters are pretty decent at answering phone calls. They regularly check to follow up on your injury treatment, which is nice, as opposed to dealing with some other auto insurers where they really don't follow up with you. You're the one that has to initiate communications with them. And overall, some Progressive adjusters can be very friendly. Progressive has a reputation for showing up at the injured person's home shortly after an accident and offering to settle the case for a cash out of, let's say, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 or so. The negative about accepting an offer very shortly after an auto accident with Progressive is that they're going to have you sign a release. And once you sign the release, you've waived all of your claims. So also their release language may not include your right to bring a claim for medical malpractice. So you may be signing away that claim. The truck that you can see in this photo is the truck that caused my client's injury, and it was a rear end accident. And my client was driving a work vehicle, but he had his own personal auto insurance policy with Progressive. The trucking company that caused this incident had what's called a self-insured retention policy of $250,000, meaning they insured themselves for the first $250,000 of the claim. Above that, they had traveler's insurance. My client had uninsured motorist with Progressive Insurance. Now, I made an uninsured motorist claim with Progressive Insurance, even though my client's claim wasn't worth the $250,000 self-retention of the at-fault driver. However, I argued to Progressive that because the other driver was self-insured, my client could immediately make an uninsured motorist claim. Progressive told me that I was completely wrong. I filed a civil remedy notice with the Department of Insurance, and Progressively ultimately changed their tune and paid $10,000. We claim my client had a labrum tear. Labrum is in the shoulder. He ultimately had surgery. We settled the rest of the claim for $200,000, and Travelers was the insurer who insured the trucking company whose driver we claimed caused the accident. But the moral of the story there is, just because Progressive tells you that you are wrong with the law or you don't have a claim, they could be dead wrong. In this case, Progressive told me my client had no right to bring an uninsured motorist claim because the other driver had liability insurance above the self-insured retention. I filed a civil remedy notice, and I turned out to be right, and they overnighted the check for $10,000. In another case, I represented a passenger who was in a bad car accident in Miami, Florida, and Progressive insured the at-fault driver. My client had injections, epidural steroid injections to his back. Progressive at that point only offered $15,000, and my client got a surgical recommendation and an appointment for surgery, and that's when Progressive changed their tune and paid us the $50,000 policy limits. We also settled with his uninsured motorist insurer with another insurer for $100,000, bringing the total settlement to $150,000. But it was interesting to know that Progressive wouldn't offer more than $15,000 after my client had epidural steroid injections to his lower back. However, once Progressive saw that he was scheduled for surgery, they paid the $50,000 limits. Many other auto insurers would have offered more than $15,000 at the time that my client had epidural steroid injections, but that's just one example, as you're going to see from many, where Progressive is pretty poor at paying for the pain and suffering component of the claim. I represented a pedestrian who was in the crosswalk crossing the street. She actually was cited for causing the accident by the police officer. The at-fault driver had Imperial Casualty Insurance Company. My client had $100,000 of uninsured motorist insurance with Progressive. She had a facial bone fracture in her face. She had surgery at the hospital. Progressive paid $100,000 in uninsured motorist insurance. That's in addition to the $10,000 from the at-fault driver's insurance. And now uninsured motorist insurance kicks in once the at-fault driver either is uninsured or doesn't have enough insurance to pay for the injured person's injuries. That includes pain and suffering, lost wages, and out-of-pocket medical bills. But the interesting point to note from that case is my client was cited by the officer for being at fault. So just because the officer says that the injured person's at fault, they could be dead wrong. This case, the officer was dead wrong to the tune of $100,000 plus the $10,000, bringing it to $110,000. The other important thing to note is even though I say Progressive is terrible at paying personal injury claims, when you have a big injury and lower limits, Progressive typically pays the limits. This is the photo of a car that my car was driving when she was in a T-bone accident. Another car made a left-hand turn in front of her. They crashed. My client had knee surgery to a plica in her knee. She also had injections to her lower back. Progressive insured the at-fault driver. They paid the $50,000 limits. We also made a claim against the vehicle's uninsured motorist insurance for $25,000, bringing the total claim to $75,000. But again, even though Progressive is terrible, my client had knee surgery and injections, and Progressive paid the $50,000 limits. In another case with shoulder surgery, Progressive paid $10,000 and Geico paid $47,600, bringing the total settlement to $57,600 for my client's shoulder surgery. In that case, my client claimed that there was 2 impacts, thus Geico potentially had an out, claiming that liability should have been on one of the other vehicles in the accident, and thus their offer was reduced. This diagram is from a $35,000 settlement where Progressive insured the driver of the car who hit a motorcycle rider. Progressive paid us $10,000 and State Farm insured the owner of the car. In Florida, the car owner is liable up to certain limits, so we were able to secure those $25,000 limits. My client had a rotator cuff surgery. Now, in the operative report, the operating surgeon said that the rotator cuff injury was not acute. That means that the injury was old. However, in Florida, you're entitled to recover money for an aggravation, which is a worsening of a pre-existing condition. In this case, his rotator cuff injury was pre-existing. In many cases, Progressive is going to hire, if the case goes into a lawsuit, or maybe sometimes before, they're going to hire a doctor who may say that your injury is old, such as a herniated disc or even a rotator cuff tear. They may say that it existed before the accident, but you can see here that cases can still have good value, even if the operating doctor says that the injury existed before the accident. My client, unfortunately, did not have any uninsured motorist insurance. Had he had uninsured motorist insurance, the settlement would have likely been much more than for $35,000. In another case, my client was driving a pickup truck. He got hit very hard. The other driver received a ticket. My client's pickup truck flipped, and he had mainly soft tissue injuries, some loss of sensation to one of his fingers. But Progressive typically, as in this case, pays better when the limits are low and the damages are higher and there's heavy property damage to the vehicle. Now, Progressive isn't alone in that, at least for pre-suit settlements, many auto insurers pay more money when there's significant damage to the vehicle. The thinking goes, a jury is more likely to believe someone is injured if there's significant damage to the vehicle. If the vehicle could have been badly damaged, the person's body could have been badly damaged. That's the way the insurance companies think. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but it's out there. In another case, I represented a young woman in a T-bone accident. Progressive insured the at-fault driver, and Progressive paid $10,000, and another insurance company paid $10,000. She was young and had a herniated disc in her lower back. And all things equal, the younger you are, the easier it is to link up a herniated disc to an accident, particularly if there's heavy impact. In another T-bone crash, Progressive insured the at-fault driver. They paid $10,000. Another insurance company paid Another $10,000, bringing the total settlement to $20,000. Again, the injury was herniated disc in the lower back that was claimed. I settled another case with Progressive for $20,000 where the injured woman claimed that the herniated disc was pressing, also known as impinging, on the spinal cord, and Progressive paid the $20,000 limit. In another case, Progressive paid $15,000 for soft tissue injuries of my client. Soft tissue injuries being neck and back pain. Another vehicle was coming in the opposite direction and made a left-hand turn to try to beat her. They collided. My client's vehicle rolled over. Typically, rollover cases are worth more because the body moves around more and it's easier to arguably link up an injury to the crash. Insurance adjusters are fearful that juries get more excited for rollover crashes. In this case, the at-fault driver was arrested for drunk driving. Typically, if someone's convicted for drunk driving, that increases the value of the claim against them because punitive damages can be threatened. Punitive damages are damages which are in addition to pain, suffering, medical bills, and lost wages. The higher the net worth of the person who is drunk that causes the accident, the higher the punitive damages that can be awarded. In that same case, I represented one of the other occupants and we settled for $14,000. He also had soft tissue injuries. Neither of them had an MRI. If they had had an MRI, that typically would have driven up the value of the claim because their medical bills, the out-of-pocket medical bills, and total bill charges would have been higher. In addition, there would have been the chance that the MRI would have discovered a herniated disc, which can also increase the full settlement value. This T-bone accident is an example of why Progressive is so bad at paying personal injury claims. The other driver was cited for the accident. My client was in vehicle number 2. The other driver blew a stop sign. My client was about 20 years old at the time of the accident, diagnosed with a herniated disc, also had some out-of-pocket medical bills. The good insurance companies in this claim, such as USAA, Hartford, Zurich, would have paid the $10,000 rather quickly. Progressive, on the other hand, wouldn't come up much above $4,000. We stuck at our $10,000 policy limits demand. The other driver, like I said earlier on, only had $10,000, which is very common with Progressive auto insurance policies. We ultimately filed a lawsuit against the at-fault driver. I didn't serve it on him so that my attorney's fees wouldn't increase to my client. Progressive, upon receiving a copy of the filed lawsuit and us filing a consumer complaint with the Department of Insurance, paid the $10,000. But Progressive can play hardball. And had we not filed the suit and just filed a consumer complaint, I don't know whether that would have been enough to get Progressive to pay the $10,000. I settled another claim for a woman who had a rotator cuff tear. We settled for Progressive's limits of $10,000. That was the other driver's limits. Progressive, again, didn't pay immediately. It took some time. I settled another soft tissue case for $10,000 with Progressive. These are just a few of my many settlements with Progressive Insurance Company. Now, as bad as Progressive is, one of the nice things up to this point so far with Progressive is they typically haven't been horrible about trying to exclude bodily injury coverage by saying that there was an unlisted driver in the household, whereas many insurance companies like Windhaven and United Auto are known for doing that. So I have to give Progressive some points for that. Also, now that Progressive is insuring Ubers, there's going to be large auto policies in those cases, which is nice. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you think Progressive is a good auto insurer, or do you think they're bad? Do you think they pay fair money for settlements? Please leave a comment in the comment section below. Please subscribe to our channel, like the video. I'm attorney Justin Ziegler with my office in Coral Gables, which is in Miami-Dade, Florida. Have a wonderful day.